Hey, Walter Sorrells back with more tips for the knife maker. Today, reviewing a Grizzly 8x76 helical cutter head jointer. Okay, so look, this is a knife making channel, but every now and then I'll color outside the lines a little, and this is one of those days. Today, reviewing a woodworking tool. Now, earlier this year, I bought a Grizzly G0858 Jointer, and I feel like I've finally used it over the past, I don't know, it's been over 6 months now, so that I can really review it fairly and accurately and have something useful to say. The G0858 is, as I said, an 8x76 helical cutter head jointer with parallelogram adjustment. More on the details as we go. And just to get this out from the get-go, I paid for this machine myself. Grizzly gave me no money, no free goodies, nothing. Full disclosure, Grizzly sponsored a couple of my videos several years ago, one of which they never paid me for, so yeah, I wouldn't turn down the money that you owe me, Grizzly, but anyway, that's water under the bridge. Now, over the years, I bought, a pretty fair number of Grizzly products. I'd characterize the Grizzly approach as, kind of rough around the edges, Asian-made gear that's usually at a pretty darn good price point for the features that you get. Gotta say, this jointer is a little bit different, but we'll get to that. Briefly, in case you came to this video from the knife making side of things, what does a jointer do? People often confuse jointers and planers. A jointer makes a piece of lumber flat, removing kinks, twists, bends, and other warpage. A planer, on the other hand, basically just makes one surface of a piece of lumber more or less parallel to the other side. If the other side's not flat, it'll just duplicate that. So, planers and jointers work hand in hand. Typically, you joint two adjoining sides of a piece of lumber, one flat surface and one edge, establishing a clean 90-degree angle with the edge of the lumber, then plane the opposite two sides to yield a piece of lumber that's parallel and straight, with all the surfaces at 90-degree angles. All things being equal, a jointer won't give you parallel, and a planer won't give you flat. I kind of splurged on this machine. I'm a professional knife maker who does the occasional woodworking project, so this was probably more jointer than a hack like me deserves, but I moved into a bigger shop this year where I had a lot more room for woodworking and felt like rewarding myself with a nice tool. Also, I had some specific large furniture making projects, including several workbenches for the new shop, that I wanted to do this year, and this would make them a lot easier. Like I said, this one is an 8x76, meaning that the jointer will accept up to 8-inch wide lumber, and the tables combine to give a 76-inch long surface to support your material. There's no length limit to what any jointer can handle, but the longer the machine, the easier it is to handle longer lumber. It's got a 3-horse motor and runs off 220 single-phase power. There's a 4-inch dust port. Does just what it's supposed to, connect a 4-inch hose, suck out the waste. The G0858 is a beast, weighing in at about 450 pounds. At the moment it lists for $23.75 with $300 shipping on the Grizzly website. Now, it used to be that jointers used rotary cutters with 3 or 4 straight blades that planed off material. And in fact, this model has a twin, quite a bit less expensive by the way, the G0857, that uses knives. This one, however, has 36 square carbide cutters, helically mounted in 4 rows on a rotary cutter head. The effect is exactly the same as using knives, but carbide lasts far longer than carbon steel knives, which have to be periodically resharpened or replaced. These cutters aren't resharpened, they're simply rotated 90 degrees when they get dull, and then chucked out and replaced when all 4 cutting surfaces are toast. This is a really nice advantage. Among other things, it means that if you hit a nail or a staple, you don't have a trashed knife. You can just rotate or replace that one little cutter, and you're back at it. The only bad thing about carbide is that when you finally do have to replace 36 little carbide cutters, you're looking at some real folding money, probably $250 or so. If you're curious why I chose the carbide cutters over the conventional knives at an additional cost of about $500, I guess it's probably because with my machining background coming out of knife making, I've long been sold on the idea of carbide tools generally and indexable carbide cutters specifically. I use them all the time on my milling machines, lathes, and so on. Now, I've heard people on the interwebs complaining that sometimes indexable cutters in planers and jointers give a rough or faceted looking cut, but I did not find this machine bore that out. Also, I hate maintenance, so I figured this would be quite a bit less maintenance intensive than the straight cutter variant. Hey, by the way, for you knife nerds out there, don't forget to sign up for my free PDF on how to get started in knife making. Link in the cards and description. Also, if you've been digging all the free content that I've been throwing your way for 13 years, yep, that's what I said, 13 years on YouTube, then consider helping us out on Patreon. And as an added bump, if you support the channel at any level on Patreon, you get access to my enormous library of plans with tons of knife builds, tools for knife making, all kinds of cool stuff. Again, link in the cards and descriptions. All right, let's get back to the review. The way jointers work, you have two tables, one slightly lower than the other. You feed the lumber in, and when it hits the cutter, you're planing off a true surface, which is then supported by the second or outfeed table, which acts as a sort of index surface, keeping the cut on plane no matter how wibbly-wobbly the incoming lumber is. So as long as you keep solid contact with that outfeed table, you're joining the wood true. If that's not possible, as with really heavily warped or cut material, you just keep running it through until you have a straight side on the lumber. The height differential on the two tables is easily adjusted with this handle, allowing you to hog off a fair amount or take a very fine cut, which typically will yield a little better accuracy, as well as taking a lot less effort to push through the machine. I gather that it's not uncommon for the front and rear or infeed and outfeed tables to arrive from the factory slightly twisted, out of parallel, dished, otherwise cattywampus, and if that's the case, you have to go through a fairly finicky and complicated truing process. But the G0858 came very nicely adjusted for me, so thankfully I did not have to fiddle with that. The cast iron tables were a good deal more refined than many of the Grizzly tools I've had over the years, which often feature kind of rough and ready castings. Very smooth and nicely surfaced. I jointed some very large and ridiculously heavy laminations for a workbench, and all that weight didn't throw the tables out of true or bend anything. Probably the first nice surprise is how quiet the machine is. For a 3-horse motor, it's not at all unpleasant to be around. And with that 3 horsepower comes plenty of grunt to handle wide lumber. The cutters cut cleanly and smoothly. Like I said, there's no choppy looking evidence of all those tiny cutters. It just comes right off the machine looking nice and smooth. I ran all kinds of knotty, gross pine through it, and it handled the challenge with ease. Same with dense, oily exotics, stabilized wood, and even wacky burls. In fact, I never ran into anything that it had the slightest trouble with. The G0858 came with a couple of pushers. Pretty much hated them. Now look, you really want to make sure that you don't jam your fist into the cutters. That is a once-in-a-lifetime mistake. But I'm a big believer that unpredictable, ineffective safety pushers are potentially more dangerous than being careful and using your hands, which are obviously much more adaptable than some plastic pusher. That said, I do plan to get some decent aftermarket pushers of some sort. There's some pretty good ones out there, but for now, I had to make do with the El Cheapos that came with the machine. I've built a coffee table, some kitchen gear, and 2 complex and sizable workbenches on the machine already, and it's still cutting just great. Here's a look at the amount of shavings I produced on the workbench project alone, 5 wheelbarrows worth. Now there's some here from the planer too, but that's mostly from the jointer. There was a ton of lamination involved, so lots of shavings. In all that time, nothing went out of adjustment, no breakdowns, and the cutters are still cutting smoothly and aggressively. The G0858 has an adjustable fence that has stops at 45, 90, and 135 degree angles, so you're not just limited to right angles. The fence is probably the most rickety part of the jointer, but I imagine that anything adjustable like that will have some play and require a little adjustment now and then. It has a fine adjustment stop so that you can reset the fence to 90 pretty quickly, and I found that worked pretty well. So, overall impressions after producing wheelbarrow load after wheelbarrow load of wood chips. I guess the simplest way to put it is this completely exceeded my expectations. Like I said before, I've bought a lot of Grizzly gear over the past decades, and this seems like just by far the most refined machine I've ever bought from them. It handles big lumber very easily, it's quiet, it's been perfectly reliable so far, it doesn't bog down easily. It just works. Complaints? Really just trivial things. It'd be nice to have a little shelf or compartment in the base for storing wrenches, the extra carbide cutters, stuff like that. The fence could maybe be a little beefier. This handle for adjusting the fence kind of gets in the way when you're joining large pieces of lumber, so I unscrewed it. But that's a pretty standard location for the handle on other brands, so I can't really fault Grizzly for that design feature. And that's about it. So this is a knife making channel. Would I recommend this machine to just any old knife maker? Look, it's a woodworking machine. That's what it's for. So no, but it's the kind of machine that has a million uses once you have it. So if you buy large burls or figured woods in lumber size and you want to cut them up for scales, all you have to do is run this lumber through your jointer one time, and you got dead flat wood that you can cut up into scales. You don't have to monkey around with sanding it or fussing around or anything. It's just flat, lay it right down on your handle. And doing that, you can save yourself a ton of money over what you'd have to pay if you buy scales, piece by piece. So does that justify a jointer for a knife maker? Like I said, absolutely not unless you're made of money. But if you have it for woodworking, if that's something that you're already doing, it's going to be enormously useful to you as a knife maker. It's just not, this whole machine is not worth it just for knife making. So last point, this is one of these machines that kind of, is on the borderline between a hobbyist and a production type design. How well would this work for a production shop? Honestly, I can't say. I don't use it 9 to 5, so I can't tell you how it's going to hold up under that kind of usage, but it seems pretty robust to me. Bottom line, for a hobbyist woodworker like me, honestly, I just expect this to be the last jointer I buy in my lifetime. So what else can I say? All right, guys, thanks for watching, and see you soon. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what we're doing here, please subscribe and make sure that you click on that bell so you get notified of all the latest videos. Want to buy a knife from me? Check out my modern blades at tacticsarmory.com. Digging the channel? You can support our video making efforts on Patreon. I've been banging away on these videos for like 10 years, so I hope you'll show some love for all that hard work. Link in the cards and descriptions. Finally, if you're interested in making Japanese swords, check out my full line of Japanese sword videos where I show how to forge Japanese swords as well as how to polish them and how to make fittings, handles, and scabbards. WalterSorrellsBlades.com.